All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Jessica Lockwood with EA Engineering, Science and Technology. Welcome to this Microsoft Teams meeting. I'm going to go over some housekeeping items with you before we get started. First, I want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. All attendees will remain muted throughout the presentation. Please turn off your video if you are not the presenter. If you have a question for discussion or a technical issue, please type it into the meeting chat. Depending on your version of Microsoft Teams, the icon, which is a chat bubble, is either on the bottom toolbar, which appears when you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, or on the top fixed toolbar. For this event, the chat will remain open for the entirety of the presentation. However, questions and discussion will be held until the end. Here is Mark Gupperlit with tonight's presentation.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Jess. So we just want to introduce ourselves here to our speakers this evening. Jamie Foster is here with Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. Jamie is the project manager for the county, and he's here to help answer any questions that y'all have. My name is Mark Upperlet. I'm an engineer, an environmental engineer with EA Engineering, Science and Technology. The county has hired us to work on the landfill closure design and the remediation of the landfill. And Megan Maffeo from Flora Teeter Landscape Architects is also with us this evening, and she's going to talk about some of the passive reuse aspects of the project. So for the presentation, we'll walk through the sort of the community engagement that the county has undergone through this project, talk about a little bit of the background of the landfill, and then talk about the proposed corrective measure for the landfill, what the landfill remediation is going to look like, and then spend a bit of time on the passive land use. So when the landfill remediation is complete, what will the landfill look like, and what are the passive uses the county is incorporating into the site, and then talk about sort of next steps for the project. So the Gude Landfill Remediation Project has been ongoing since 2009. It started with some various investigations of the site and analysis of the groundwater and landfill gas at the site. And since the project began, the county has engaged with the GLCC group, the Gude Landfill Concerned Citizens, which has been primarily represented by the Durwood Station HOA presidents and others that have shown interest. And so it's been a way for the county and the nearby residents to stay in touch throughout the project. And there have been 58 meetings since 2009 where information's been exchanged and updates have been provided to the community. There have been also a number of community meetings like the one this evening, where we've discussed the project and given updates and what's happening at the landfill. There has been information provided in the HOA newsletters as well to residents and through the email groups more recently. And then the county maintains a remediation webpage for the site, and the URL is provided here on the page. We'll also post that in the chat, so you can go ahead and take a look at that. But that is a great resource, especially for those of you that may not be familiar with the site or with the current project. There's a lot of great background information on the website. And in addition, there are some letters and fact sheets that are also posted on that website. So if you're not familiar with the background, it is just southeast of the Durwood Station community. That's a over 100-acre parcel, and the landfill was operated from the 1960s until 1982. And in 1982, the landfill was covered with 2 feet of soil. So it has a soil cap on it now. And as you can see from the aerial photo, there's grass growing over the site. And the site also has an active landfill gas extraction system. So when the waste decomposes, it generates gas, and there's a system there. It basically acts like a big vacuum, and it sucks the gas out of the landfill. And there's piping that exists on the site to collect all that. In the 2008 timeframe, Maryland Department of the Environment directed DEP to initiate investigations at the site and evaluate the groundwater quality. And again, that was when EA was brought on to support the county with those efforts. So we've been monitoring groundwater quality at the site and looking at the best alternative to make the site to make it better for the environment overall. And so in 2013, the county and MDE entered into a consent order that defined some of the requirements for the landfill assessment and remediation of the landfill. And so this is sort of this was the chosen alternative for improving the landfill and protecting the groundwater better. And the alternative is landfill capping and additional landfill gas collection. So you can see in the image sort of a view of what the capping the landfill looks like. So right now there's existing waste in the landfill, and there's currently about 2 feet of soil over all the waste. So as part of this project, we'll be coming in and we'll be relocating some of the waste, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We'll be putting another, once the waste is relocated, putting a layer of soil over it, and then a geosynthetic cap. And this is basically a plastic membrane. It's very thick and sturdy, and it'll prevent rainwater from infiltrating into the waste. On top of the geosynthetics, then there's 2 feet of soil, and that becomes the medium for planting meadow and grasses on top of the landfill. And so any rainfall that falls on the landfill, a lot of it will drain over land, and then that which doesn't drain over land will infiltrate through here and be collected on top of the geosynthetics and then drain outward from the landfill. So again, the main goal of the landfill and the capping is to minimize the infiltration of rainwater, which then minimizes the amount of water that percolates through the waste and can get into the groundwater. So over time, this will result in an improvement in the groundwater quality at the site. In addition to limiting rainfall, the geosynthetics also help collect or help capture the landfill gas. So any landfill gas that may rise up through the waste is held in by the geosynthetics. And in its final form, the landfill will still have a gas extraction system that similar to what's out there today. And those gas wells will, again, it's like a vacuum system. It'll pull the landfill gas out of the landfill, and that will be flared and destroyed. So this is again an aerial view of the site, and in red we highlight sort of the limit of the capping of the landfill. And then in the blue, you're looking at the property boundary for the parcel. So the capping will be performed over the majority of the landfill. And this area here where you can see it's sort of grassed, it's relatively flat. So there'll be some work in regrading the landfill, making it a little bit steeper for better drainage. And we'll be capping up to the edge of these tree stands here. And so most of these trees are around the edge of the landfill and on the sides of the landfill, and they're pretty established trees. It's pretty good habitat. And so our goal was to leave those trees intact and just focus on capping the upper portions of the landfill where there's likely more infiltration. These slopes around the landfill, in addition to having trees on them, which helps reduce the infiltration, the slopes are also much steeper, and so the water runs off more quickly. Because the cap will be very close to the property boundary on the side by the community here, we actually will need to remove waste along the property boundary. And we'll be removing a portion of waste, and that'll be placed up on top of the landfill in other areas of the landfill to increase the slopes. So there will be some work right alongside the community here. And that waste relocation, will involve construction equipment. And so during construction, there will be some impacts, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. So I'm going to highlight sort of 5 different environmental impacts that you'll notice during construction. And I want to highlight sort of the long-term impacts as well. So in the long term, all of these effects will actually you'll notice things will be the same as they are today, or perhaps even a little bit better. So the construction of the cap will be sort of a temporary nuisance, but the result will be a much improved site from an environmental standpoint, and then from a public benefit standpoint. And again, Megan's going to talk about what the site will look like when it's finished and some of the nice amenities that'll be included. So one of the potential effects is traffic. Again, after the site is constructed, the traffic patterns should return to normal conditions as they are now. There won't be any active activities on the landfill that will draw any more traffic. But during construction, there will be traffic in and out of the landfill. So to mitigate the impact on the community, the heavy construction traffic will be directed to the site from South Lawn Lane. And so any of the big dump trucks and construction equipment coming in will be coming in and out through that route. And it'll minimize the traffic closer to the community. There will be an administrative area for the project closer to the community here on East Gude Drive. And that'll primarily consist of construction trailers and parking for the construction workers. So another potential impact is dust. Again, in the long term, once the site is capped and the site is seeded and the vegetation is growing, it'll be just like it is now, probably no noticeable dust. But during construction, as I mentioned, we'll actually be removing the grass and moving waste. And so during that process, when the grass is gone, that there's potentially, bare earth and waste exposed. So there is potential dust generated during construction. Some of the strategies we'll employ to mitigate that will be, again, the heavy construction traffic will be routed further away from the community. So any potential dust generation wouldn't be that close to the community. There will be stabilized construction entrances, which are basically stone entrances what the vehicles will travel over. And that'll help minimize any dust and dirt tracking on the vehicles as they leave the site. There will be an on-site speed limit. So the slower the vehicles go, the less dust they generate. And then probably one of the main strategies, and it's used on a lot of construction sites, is when vehicles come in and out, we basically water the access road. And you keep the soil wet enough that it doesn't generate dust, but not so wet that it gets really muddy. So that's something that sort of happens ongoing throughout the project. And then dump trucks carrying soil and things will be covered to minimize any dust generation from those vehicles themselves. So another environmental effect will be noise. So again, in the long term, the noise will basically be the same as it is now. We're restoring the site to a sort of a nice meadow condition as it is now. There won't be any significant uses up there other than the recreational areas that Megan will talk about. But during construction, it is going to be a construction site and there will be noise. There will be bulldozers and excavators and dump trucks that will be operating pretty close to the community here, right along the right of way, where the waste will be excavated and pulled back and placed on site. So some of the steps we're taking to mitigate noise include establishment of a vegetative buffer between the community and the landfill. And the county has already started that work. As a matter of fact, vegetation has already been planted. It was planted in the fall, so it'll have approximately a year to establish and grow, and then throughout the project will continue to grow, and that'll help mitigate the noise. The construction work will also be limited to weekdays and daylight hours, so that when there is noise, it's certainly not an impact to people trying to sleep and those sorts of things. The construction equipment, will have mufflers. It'll be sort of modern equipment that'll be as quiet as it can be, but there are, as you've probably heard, there are backup noise alarms and things on the equipment for safety reasons. So that will be noticeable. And Montgomery County does have a noise control law, so we will follow the noise control law, and the contractor that's selected to do this work will be required to develop a noise suppression plan, and that will show how they'll comply with the noise control law. And the noise control law is actually DEP's website has a really nice summary of that noise control law, and it limits the noise to a certain number of decibels at the property boundary. So another potential environmental effect during construction is odors. Now, again, in the long term, odors are expected to be at the same levels they are now, which I think is pretty negligible. And there's even the potential that with the improved landfill gas collection that if there are any odors now, there's the potential they could even be less in the future. But during construction, while we are excavating waste, there's definitely likely to be odors. The waste has, been in the ground, since some of it since the 1960s. So when we start to dig into it, some of it could have quite a strong odor. So a couple mitigation strategies we're implementing will be limiting the area of waste that's opened at any time. So the contractor will be able to excavate waste during the day, and then at the end of the day, they'll have to cover it back up with soil or a tarp temporarily each day, so that overnight the waste will be covered. And then during that excavation, if there are odor issues, we've got options such as spraying foam over the waste, which will help control the odor while the waste is exposed. And then there are also a misting system, which basically sprays up into the air and sort of helps neutralize the odor. So we've got a couple measures to help mitigate odors. And then just wanted to touch on site access, safety, and security. So the site I know is currently fenced, although there is opportunity for access to the site. But in the future, the site, again, the fence will be maintained, but there will be permanent access points. And those are identified, and Megan will actually talk about those in just a minute. So in terms of accessing the site for the future uses, that access will be improved. Now, during construction, from a safety standpoint, obviously there won't be any access for the public during construction. The site will be fenced, and again, that's primarily a safety concern. So some of the mitigation strategies for health and safety, the contractor will be required to develop a site-specific health and safety plan. That's primarily aimed at the construction workers on site and ensuring that proper health and safety protocols in accordance with OSHA and other requirements are met. There will be the fencing, as I mentioned, around the site and clear signage warning people about the work on site and limiting access. And then the county is also going to install some closed circuit television surveillance of the site. So that'll give the opportunity to monitor and ensure that that things are being done in a safe manner and there isn't any access to the site that shouldn't be. So that's sort of a summary of the potential nuisances during construction and the mitigation measures that the county's directed us to include in the design to sort of minimize those as much as possible. The other thing I'll mention here, again, back to sort of an aerial view, and again, the red line is sort of the limit of the capping work. The project will be done in phases. So these are the final phases of capping for the project. So you can see them numbered 1 through 7. The work will start on the side by Durwood Station. And so the work in phase F1 will be completed first, and then phase F2 before the contractor moves on to the eastern portion of the site. So the dividing line here between phases 1 and 2 and the eastern portion of the site through here is roughly is sort of a high point, sort of a ridge line in the site. So what our goal is here is to get in, do the work here, relocate the waste along the slope, place it up here, and then come in and get this area capped, get the soil put on and seeded and grass growing, so that the portion facing the community, that work will all happen at one time, will get done and accomplished, and the contractor will move on to the eastern portion of the site. So that the work that happens here, again, with this ridge line and being further away from the community, a lot of those nuisances will be, it won't be as much of a nuisance while they're working on this side of the site. So the goal is to get in and get out and move on to the eastern portion of the site. So now I'm going to pass it over to Megan. That was sort of a walk through some of the construction phase effects, and now Megan's going to highlight some of what the site's going to look like when it's all finished.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. As Mark mentioned, my name is Megan Maffeo. I am a landscape architect and serve as Flora Teeter's lead, guiding the master planning and development for the passive use amenities. As you'll see tonight, this project has two parts. First, being the remediation and installation of the permanent landfill cap, as Mark described. And second, the installation of passive land uses that define the next chapter in the story for this site. The design team, led by environmental engineers at EA Engineering and supported by our team of landscape architects at Flora Teeter, have been working very closely with Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the Gude Landfill Concerned Citizens, which includes members from the Durwood Station community. Meetings were held on a regular basis with the Gude Landfill Concerned Citizens and were incorporated throughout the project duration. This was to ensure that opportunities for participation and feedback were incorporated at each step in the master plan process. And I would like to say, we really appreciate the GLCC's initiative and their willingness to commit their time and energy to this process and to stay informed and to make sure that their community's concerns were heard, because ultimately their input did help guide the selection of the proposed uses in the preferred concept. So the timeline displayed on the screen gives you a chronological step-by-step overview, taking the project from our initiation of the master plan process through design and construction. Shown along the blue bar are a series of red circles that represent when meetings were held with the GLCC. Shown at the left is the start point for the master plan in 2018, where a vision, goals, and guiding principles were established. We then progressed to a series of site analysis explorations and evaluation of a menu of potential land uses that informed our development of 3 different concept alternatives. By way of review and discussion of the 3 alternatives with the GLCC and over 100 responses to an online public survey, we were able to select one preferred concept to progress to a refined design and constructible project. So this is where we are today as we finalize the engineering and contract documents that will be issued for contractor bids, which is estimated to occur later this year. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of the master plan. This was to integrate the construction of the permanent landfill capping with passive recreation land uses that are open to the public. And at one of our earliest meetings with the GLCC and Montgomery County DEP, a vision was developed. And that vision is to create a park-like environment with destination trails and limited amenities that allow access to the restored landscape of the landfill. And supporting that vision, we established 8 goals to help guide the master plan process. You see these on the screen, but I would like to read them aloud. So first, we have maintain the integrity of the landfill and allow for continued monitoring during post-closure. Number 2, accommodate uses to support the function of the Montgomery County Recycling and Resource Management Division. 3, include recreation uses compatible with the landfill. 4, explore the feasibility for connections to adjacent parks and paths. 5, establish a naturalistic meadow environment and encourage the interaction of native bird species with the new flora. 6, include signage or art to celebrate the new ecology. 7, create an environment that is safe for users. And 8, maintain or enhance drainage swales and other features required for landfill reclamation. These are really important for us as reference points, and we use these to check in when we are making decisions through the master planning process to ensure that we are aligning those decisions with the project vision. So next slide, please. As part of our initial understanding of the site, we look at the regional context. You see on this slide, the landfill site is in green at the center of the graphic. We show a 1 mile radius and a 2 mile radius depicted on this graphic as white dashed circles. This gives us a clearer understanding of the adjacent land uses and influences of the site. You see we have Rock Creek Park and its associated stream valley corridor to the east of the landfill. Meadwood Golf Course and Lake are to the north. The established residential community, Durwood Station, to the northeast, and commercial and industrial uses to the south. We feel like this is a really useful graphic in that it shows the relative size of the landfill site and its proximity and its easy access from centers of residential and commercial activity, as well as direct connections to open space corridors, connecting and expanding habitat. So on the next slide. The master plan process began with our review of past plans for development of the landfill and correspondence in a letter from the GLCC to the county executive presented to County Council in 2017. This letter documented preferences of the GLCC for future use of the landfill. A comparative analysis was developed to evaluate 15 potential land uses, including many of those listed in that letter. And for each potential land use, we established criteria rankings that were weighted together to determine an overall suitability ranking for compatibility with the vision and goals developed for this site. The 5 evaluation criteria that we used were to look at what is the impact to the landfill remediation, what is the level of maintenance, magnitude of cost, are there any noise level concerns, and are there any adjacency concerns or separation requirements for a specific use. With those rankings, we had a high, a medium, and a low suitability, and we decided to consider both the medium and high suitability when we were developing our concept alternatives. And I would like to say that, you know, when we were looking at the potential uses, that all recreation activities really are secondary to the landfill remediation, and that these proposed passive use amenities need to respect and not compromise the landfill cap in any way. So next slide. 3 concept alternatives were developed to assist the owner and the community stakeholders in deciding on a preferred concept plan, which resulted in defined recreation destinations along a 5-mile trail network that's nestled in an open space meadow that's close to 100 acres in size. This slide gives you the preferred concept master plan. The site is accessed in 2 locations along the existing Gude Trail. There's a southern access point and a northern access point. There are 4 separate recreation destinations located throughout the site, and those include a High Point lookout, an enclosed dog play, a children's nature play, and a disc golf course. And with a project this size, it's really important to have a logical trail network that connects and defines the recreational destinations and serves as an overarching organizing framework. The master plan incorporates approximately 5 miles of new trail for exercise and recreation. And on this plan, those trails are color-coded to show circuits and options for how one might explore the site. And at prominent trail intersections, way stations are proposed. Each way station is an opportunity to orient users with wayfinding and educational signage. During the master planning process, there was interest in exploring the potential for renewable energy on the landfill, and a portion of the site, 25 acres in size, was identified for reservation for future evaluation and potential installation of a solar array. as an opportunity to showcase that renewable energy and support education focused on the sustainable evolution of the landfill. So this would be an added benefit in that it could be a potential revenue source for the county. And that solar array, that the area reserved for that is positioned on the southern portion of the site, apart from adjacent residential uses and the proposed recreation amenities. So next slide. I'd like to dive in a little bit more detail about the recreation trail and the recreation amenities. There are 2 design conditions incorporated into the overall trail network. The primary trail circulation and vast majority of the trail network will be a maintained gravel trail, as shown in the upper image. The gravel trail width will be 15 feet wide with a mown edge of 10 feet on either side of the gravel trail. The gravel trails will also serve as periodic access for maintenance and monitoring by DEP for the landfill systems and landfill gas extraction wells. In select areas of the site, a secondary grass trail condition is encountered, as shown in the bottom image, and this would simply be a 20-foot wide mown path. These are incorporated in select locations to create shortcuts or avoid more strenuous trail sections, or to connect trails where service roads are not part of the design. The grass trails provide users more options for navigating the site. So next, I'll walk you through the recreation destinations. Each of these slides will show a plan view in the bottom left corner, orienting you to where this amenity occurs on the overall site, as well as a description of how we anticipate the destination will be used. So first is the High Point Lookout. It's located at the highest elevation of the site, and it's a passive use area that affords users a view across the site looking south towards the city of Rockville's skyline. Recreation uses that we envision for this destination could include walking, dog walking on leash, kite flying, bird watching, as well as seating options for rest in nature. This area will be maintained as turf grass or short meadow planting, and it's located approximately a half-mile walk from the southern access, or less than a quarter of a mile walk from the northern access. Next slide. The Children's Nature Play is located central to the site and adjacent to the recreation trail in a high visibility area. The Children's Nature Play will provide nature-inspired play elements and activity areas to foster a connection between children and nature and the natural environment. Signage, bird and butterfly houses, and other educational elements will be incorporated into the design of this destination. Play elements and seating will be created using trees removed during the remediation of the landfill, and a mulched surface will be provided in the vicinity of those nature play elements. And on the next slide, we've created a visualization of what this design would look like. So there are play elements, there's shade structure, and how this fits into the overall site. So for reference, the High Point Lookout that we just talked about is located on the hill in the top right portion of this image. And these nature play spaces encourage creativity and decision making and allow children to create their own play experience. On the next slide, we showcase the enclosed off-leash dog play. This area provides a fenced designated space for supervised off-leash dog play and exercise. And so some of the design elements include a double gated entrance to minimize conflicts of incoming and outgoing dogs, and separate areas for large and small dogs. The fenced area will encompass approximately 2 acres in size and will be maintained as short meadow planting. A shade structure, benches, and boulder seating will be provided inside of this enclosure. And the fourth recreation destination is a 9-hole disc golf course. So this is a sport that we see growing in popularity, and it's typically played in groups of 2 or more, where players stand at a tee box and throw a frisbee-like disc toward a target or basket. This area will be maintained as a combination of turf grass and short meadow planting. And then the next slide, just as important as the new passive recreation amenities for this community is the restored meadow habitat. Due to the typical soil section above the geosynthetic cap and concern for potential damage that tree or shrub roots might cause, a meadow landscape was determined to be the most appropriate planting approach for this site. Landscapes are living and continually evolving through both natural processes and human influences. That notion is especially relevant to the landscape site as it progresses through remediation and post-closure reuse. Our designers partnered with local birding communities and attended birdwatching outings at the nearby restored Oaks landfill to better understand the avian species that thrive in open meadow habitats. We developed a custom meadow seed mix for this site, incorporating a diversity of perennial and grass species to provide both host plants and food supply, supporting butterflies, bees, and other insects that help to establish a food web for birds, bats, and beyond. As a restored native meadow habitat, the landfill will support birdwatching activities and will be an opportunity to bring awareness of important meadow ecologies through environmental signage and community engagement via scheduled bird walks with local birdwatching organizations. On the next slide, to assist park users with navigating the site, 4 way stations are located at important trail crossings that include trail markers for wayfinding and serve as a meeting spot or rest area. We have established a theme, an educational theme for each of the way stations. On the next slide, you'll see a visualization of one of those way stations, each one including a trail marker, directional signage. Let's skip to the next slide, Mark. Right, so this is a visualization of what one of the way stations would look like on this site. And you'll see the tall trail marker with directional signage, a map of you are here, educational signage, seating, and a trash receptacle. Next slide. As mentioned, educational sign panels will be incorporated at each of the 4 way stations. And the 4 educational themes that are to be highlighted are the evolution of the landfill, and this would provide a timeline and description of how the site has changed pre-landfill to restored meadow. Meteorological weather station will be our second focus. There's an existing weather station currently on site that we will be relocating to one of the way stations. There's historical weather data and ongoing weather data that will be collected that will be available via a website for anyone interested in accessing this type of data. The third education focus will be pollinator habitat. This will show how the landfill site is connected to open space corridors and describes how this is important for building strong food webs, starting at the insect and pollinator level to support species as you rise up that food chain. And then the fourth focus is avian habitat. And this signage will identify a few of the avian species that you're likely to see in an open meadow, and gives instructions on how to access the eBird app, which is a really fun interactive tool that crowdsources information for tracking bird species. Next slide. One of the way stations that's focused on avian habitat is located adjacent to an environmental art installation shown in this visualization. The intent is to incorporate vertical elements in the landscape that not only create visual interest, but also serve as perch posts for birds on a site where the trees are only located along the perimeter of the meadow. In addition, with a vibrant color, these will be visible at a distance from other areas of the site, and we hope will spark curiosity to draw users into and explore new areas of the landfill site. Next slide. In addition, we on this slide are showing a sampling of educational signposts. These are focused on avian and perennial species that are likely to be encountered. These signs give pointers for identification of the various species and fun facts for learning and something new. A total of 12 education post signs are incorporated along one of the recreation trails. Next slide. This shows a general overview of the different types of signage all on one, all next to each other for easy comparison. This includes both wayfinding and educational signage, and it's designed for consistency in material and graphics to read as one cohesive program. So starting on the right side of the slide and working left, the tallest is the trail marker, and that's found at each of the 4 way stations at a height of 10 feet. So you will be able to see those from a distance. The second from the right is the largest education sign, and these are found at each of the way stations. Next are informational signs that provide important information to users about how to use the site, instructions for the enclosed dog play, and emergency contact information. Next, we have small directional signposts. This is also shown in the enlargement at the center of the slide. These are located at trail intersections that do not connect at way stations. These are important. They help provide clear guidance for users to navigate the trail network and to direct users away from areas of landfill that are not intended for public use, such as the future solar array. And then next we have the educational signposts that focus on the identification of the avian and perennial plant species. And then finally, the disc golf tee posts that identify the golf hole and the par number. Next slide. The largest use of the site will be the establishment of the meadow with perennial and grass species averaging around 5 feet in height. With this in mind, physical access to the site is intended for the trail network and the recreation destinations. The meadow supports the restoration of the site and creates a larger framework for establishing avian habitat and supports passive recreation amenities of bird watching, as well as just respite and rest in nature. Initial construction after the installation of the landfill cap includes everything we've just discussed, with the exception of the solar array. A timeline has not been identified by the county at this time for moving forward with that project component. In the near term, this area will be planted as meadow. And the site is intended for public use dawn to dusk, with access and maintenance provided by Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. Next slide. So this vision is progressing to fruition with dedicated funding and the sustained commitment from forward-thinking county leadership. This slide forecasts the anticipated schedule for implementation from where we are today forward. And I'm going to let Mark jump back in and speak to this one.
Great, thank you, Megan. Yeah, I think the things I want to highlight here is as we're in the moving into the second quarter of 2021, we are completing the design work for the landfill. Our 100% design submission is actually on the Gude Remediation landfill webpage. We're working through final permitting with the regulatory agencies, with Maryland Department of the Environment, with Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services. We've received approval from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for a mandatory referral. So once those final permits are in place, the project will move to procurement for the contractor to actually perform the work. So we've started some of the procurement activities and we'll actually receive proposals and anticipate construction starting at the end of this calendar year. The construction schedule, we're anticipating approximately 4 years. to move through the entire site. As I mentioned, it's about 100 acres of landfill cap, plus the waste relocation as we discussed. That schedule, yeah, it's possible that the contractor will come up with some approaches that may allow them to streamline that and get it done more quickly. But that's sort of our best guess at this point. Once the contractor's on board, we'll have a better sense of that. And once the construction's complete, there will be time for the meadow to establish the vegetation. And then Montgomery County DEP will continue to maintain the site after the construction period. So throughout construction, the county is committed to ongoing community engagement. We'll continue to hold GLCC and DEP meetings as needed for critical updates. And then continuing to use the community networks to get information out, as well as the remediation webpage. Again, that we'll post the URL in the chat, so it's easy to access, but it's pretty easy to find on the county's website. If you go to DEP and facilities, you'll find Gude Landfill, and this is what it looks like. And all of the historical documents are posted there if you're interested. This presentation, as a matter of fact, is already posted on the website, so you can find a copy of this. And just want to close with county contacts and information. So again, Jamie Foster, who introduced himself early on, is here with us today. He's the county's project manager. His contact information is listed here. This is the URL for the webpage. Just wanted to remind folks, if there are any questions and concerns into construction, you can use the 311 line through the county to call and ask about things. I think that concludes the presentation. And we'll just do a check here. I noticed folks have been posting questions in the chat, and I know that some of them have been being answered as we've gone as well. So we'll check in and see if there are any other outstanding questions to answer at this point.
Hey, Mark, this is Jessica. Yeah, Jamie looks like he's really been on top of it and getting back to people. So Jamie, I will rely on you if you want to pop in and mention any ones that you think could use some additional follow-up. But I'll start with the most recent one that was posted asking, at the entry points to the area, the land is currently very steep. Will it still be walking paths, or will there be ramps? And how will it be handicap accessible?
Great question. Once we regrade the site, that grading will be able to get rid of some of those steep slopes as you enter the site. And if you notice now at the Gude Trail, there is a huge hill before you can access the site. But one of the reasons why we're doing waste relocation is to take the waste from that property line. So then that way we won't have that steep hill as you encroach on the site.
Jamie, I want to jump in too. That's another reason why the decision was made to have two access points. The southern access point is a less steep, it's a much easier grade up to the top of the landfill as compared to the northern access point, which is a steeper climb. So there are options depending on how aggressive or challenging you want to make it. But that was a really important reason to have two access points.
All right, I do believe one of the other questions that still needed to be answered was, will additional infrastructure, maintenance facility, et cetera, be necessary on the site in order to support the trails, mowing, and other improvements?
Great question. No, the county DEP currently has an existing property maintenance contract. So that property maintenance contractor will be solely responsible for maintaining that site, similar to how they do now.
All right, thanks, Jamie. We've got a few more coming in. Will the wastewater lagoon currently behind the fence at the, jumping up on me, at the northern exit of the site be mitigated or addressed given possible increase in foot traffic with addition of the access point?
Yes, that's considered a stormwater pond, and that is part of the stormwater management plan that we currently have submitted to Department of Permitting Services for review and approval. Great question.
All right. Will the access points be locked down at night? It's a concern about children accessing the area.
Great question. Yes, the plan is to have active security on site after hours.
Thank you. What will the Dubuque Court connector look like? Will it be an improved path beside the utilities fenced area?
Megan, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this area is intended to be a maintained mown grass path, accented by new shrub plantings. So what it is today, it's not intended to be, an asphalt or stone dust or anything like that. It will remain a grass mown trail, but defined and regularly maintained.
All right. Will it be possible to host private events?
That's a good question. I doubt it, being that this will be a public park. So I don't think it will be possible to have a private event at a public park. Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
Do you know what will happen to the abandoned homeless shelter at the southwest corner of the property?
No, I don't. That property is currently managed and operated by Department of General Services. So DGS within the county will have the best answer for that question.
Right. Where will all the drainage from the hill be draining out to?
Great question. Mark, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of the design of the landfill and the regrading, one of the things we did is look at where all the existing drainage is going, and then we ensure that in the revised grading that the drainage, the amount of drainage going to those existing points is the same or less. So there is currently some water coming off the slope of the landfill towards the community, and it gets into a storm drain behind the homes here. So in the revised condition, there will still be some water coming from this portion of the site, getting into that same storm drain. We mentioned the stormwater pond here. There will be some water still flowing through that pond. And then there's a sort of ridge line through the site here. A lot of the water will be flowing to the east. And so again, that's something that the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services is reviewing all of our calculations and reports and ensuring that they meet the requirements.
Thanks, Mark. Will there be possibly a connection to the Rock Creek Trail from the pollinator loop?
This is something that we evaluated and looked at very early on in our site analysis. We saw that as an opportunity and looked at we identified three different potential alignments to connect to that, and met with MNC PPC and explored the viability of those, and ultimately decided that they would require some grading, tree clearing, potentially bridge that spans the floodplain of Rock Creek to actually get to make that connection. And we just decided that it was too far out of the scope, and that the connection to Gude was just as viable. It would be about the same distance and cause less impact on the environmental resources. So we did not make that connection.
All right. Will the cap stop the vibrations that currently occur sporadically or just lessen them?
That's a great question. So the Vibrations that are sometimes experienced in Durwood Station, that comes from the flare station. DEP, we have worked with the landfill gas contractor to do some repairs and upgrades to the existing flare station to help mitigate the residents' issues where the residents in Durwood Station were feeling those vibrations in that residence. So hopefully you won't experience that anymore. If so, please contact me. My contact information is all over the Gude Landfill webpage. But hopefully the remediation project will help with better gas collection. And then eventually the county is going to have to do a little bit more work to kind of minimize the flare station to accommodate the decrease in gas generation at the site.
All right. That is all the questions that we have currently typed in.
Very good. All right.
I was just scrolling back through. There was a lot of really great conversation. Thank you all for participating.
Yep.
And thank you so much for the great questions. I'm a proponent for answering questions. So like I said before, if you have any questions about this Gude remediation project, please do not hesitate to contact me. My contact information is in this presentation. And as Mark mentioned before, this presentation is available on the Gude webpage. So all you need to do is go into Google and type Gude Landfill Remediation. The first link that pops up will be the solid waste services link. Click on that link and the information will be there.
And Nick had asked whether it was going to be a continuous cap.
Yes, the cap will be continuous across the site. It will be constructed in phases, but it will be all connected. And yeah, exactly. One continuous cap when it's finished.
All right. And one final question. Tyler Beck had asked, will there be dog waste stations as part of the dog park?
Yes.
Yes, we'll have trash receptacles at each of the waste stations, and you can deposit dog waste in those.
And the county's property maintenance contractor will be responsible for maintaining the dog park.
All right. I have one final question if you guys are still okay with that. There was a question, will Incinerator Lane be blocked or will this be an entrance as well?
That will be the main ingress egress for this project. We will try not to use 600 East Gude Drive during this construction project. So the main entrance and exit for this site will be Incinerator Lane off of South Lawn Lane.
Jamie, that's for construction, but for the passive land use, we're not intending that this would be accessed by vehicles.
Yes, no, that would be locked. Yes, absolutely. Great point.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate all the great questions and the kudos. Glad to provide the updates.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording if we're okay with that.
Absolutely.
All right.